Hello everyone and welcome to this latest video discussion as part of the RICS Tech Partner Programme. My name is Andrew Knight and I've been with RICS for nearly 13 years now. I sit within the Thought Leadership and Analytics part of the organisation, and my role is to look at the whole impact of data and technology across the built and natural environment. And with over 110,000 members worldwide, working right across that property life cycle, from land, planning and development, construction, agency, valuation, brokerage in all its forms, asset management, building surveying. It's obviously a huge canvas upon which data and tech is having a profound effect. And indeed, our members work across all the major asset types, whether that's land itself, residential, commercial, alternative assets and infrastructure. So once again, a huge impact given the wide range of assets and work that our members do. And I'm really happy to have Simon and Manuela join me this morning from We2Sure. So welcome to the call.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you,
Pleasure.
Andrew.
Pleasure.
It's a pleasure.
And
yeah.
It's always nice to get a bit of kind of human background before we kind of get into the bits and bytes and the platform that you're working on. So maybe if I could start with you first, Simon, a bit of a backstory on you and a bit of a backstory on the origin story of We2Sure.
Sure. So I'm an insurance industry veteran, 35 years in the game. Started my career in the City of London, worked my way up to becoming an underwriter for Lloyd's Syndicate. And then in the early 2000s, there was a huge amount of consolidation going on. So I transferred over to manage a captive reinsurance company in Dublin. And of that, my time there, I was heavily involved in product innovation and design. And after a period of time, the parent companies went through this process of mergers, and the captive was converted into a professional reinsurance company. And I was the chief underwriting officer there. And that's where I met Manuela. And I'll transfer over to Manuela, and she'll get back.
Yeah, my background is different. I started in investment banking, in capital markets, derivatives, financial engineering, when they were good words back then, and then and then I co-founded the Commerzbank in Milan, and then I moved on as finance director post-bankruptcy to be part of the rescue team and turnaround team of the biggest European bankruptcy. And all along my career up to now, I've been working with insurance, for the insurance, but never actually entered the insurance till when I was part of the same company that was an Italian insurance company, then offered me a position in Dublin as chief operating officer, where I met with Simon, and where we were wondering what the future of insurance would be and how it could look like, and what actions actually the insurance could take in order to help the green transition, and in order to support actually with products, not just without. The insurance usually is withdrawing. They do by not doing. They help the transition by not insuring, by readdressing their investment portfolio to other initiatives. But actually, there are no products that would support the transition. And this is what we decided to do, and the We2Sure was born.
Indeed. And I guess it's an obvious question because, you know, one of our strategic objectives here at RICS is to help build this sustainable built environment. But, you know, what specific problems from your perspective do you see with the built environment in terms of CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions? Perhaps, Simon, you could give us your thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, unfortunately for your members, the problem that they have is the size of the CO2 footprint that the built environment has. According to the United Nations, it's approximately 40% of the global output of carbon dioxide comes from built up areas. And so your members are faced with this enormous task of having to sort of decarbonize that footprint, which is huge. And this contribution comes from both direct and indirect emissions. So the direct emissions is obviously the construction of buildings and the operation of the buildings. things. The indirect is the production of the raw materials into building materials, which generate large carbon footprints, the transportation of these materials, the energy consumption of the building itself, so heating, cooling, lighting, etc. And again, unfortunately for your members, this isn't going to go away because the urban environment continues to grow, and it will continue to grow. There are no indications that this is going to reduce.
Yeah, and I guess it's probably worth giving our ICS's perspective on this issue, because as you say, there's that sort of overall 40% number. But if you look at the kind of detail of it, I was doing some research myself yesterday, and you kind of break it down into those different areas where our members and the profession as a whole need to impact this, because you look at kind of the actual operation of buildings, and you have, I think, about 6% of that overall total from commercial. You have, I think, about 12-13% from residential, but of course then you add on the production of cement, the production of steel, and those other things that add up eventually to that larger number. And I guess the challenge for our members is that they're operating businesses themselves. They may well be operating properties themselves and have a responsibility to look at that aspect. But obviously, they're also then giving advice to their clients in terms of construction projects. And certainly from a standards perspective, we've recently done a second version of our whole life carbon assessment to get the methodology to look at the impact of embodied and operational carbon on that whole life perspective. When you're looking at an asset from birth to death, we have a building operation standard that looks at the kind of metrics you should be measuring as a building occupier and owner to make sure you're making the buildings as efficient as possible. We've done quite a lot of thought leadership around the kind of material science piece, about looking at the kind of ways that materials can be used in a different way, whether that's timber or low carbon concrete. So it's a very challenging area, I think, for our members, because there are so many aspects of where carbon is produced. And of course, if you look at those scope 3, when it comes to how far are your employees traveling to work, for example, it can be very difficult to measure those things. So, you know, that's our perspective, I guess. I mean, turning to you, Manuela, there's been a lot, I've recently seen some articles in The Economist particularly talking about it, but the whole issue with carbon credit certificates and what happens if they go, what are the problems around that area as well?
Yeah, it's a fascinating scenario. In fact, coming back to your last comment, you have kind of different way to address the greening. One is to obviously do whatever you can to readdress your internal processes, to use material, but there are things that you cannot avoid. The so-called unabattable. Just for instance, if you have to manage a historical building. Historical buildings have all their rules. They cannot have a retrofit like any other residential modern kind of building. So you need to really offset whatever is unabattable. And how do you do that? You basically buy, as a company, certificates that would equal the amount of tons in polluted emissions that you are producing. So for 1 ton produced, you buy 1 carbon credit certificate that would offset your footprint. Now, these certificates, the most commonly used ones and the most available ones, are coming from nature-based solutions. So let's say for being very simple, forests. Now, the point is that what happens if the certificate that you buy is fake or fraudulent? So if it comes from an asset that A, never existed, or is smaller than what it has been declared. So basically, whatever was declared is an overissuance in respect to what the forest could actually produce. So in that case, you have something in good faith, in absolutely good faith, that is worth nothing. And actually, while doing something good, it could boomerang back in a very negative way. Because what happens? You can be accused of greenwashing, and that has a full cascade elements effect, because greenwashing affects your brand, greenwashing affects your market, consumers or clients can walk away. Consumers because they don't trust the brand anymore, they don't trust the promise. Suppliers or customers because you're not then meeting their criteria for all good reason, in all good faith, but still you don't. And then you have the internal problem of the responsibility and liability that goes up to the board, because the new regulations are holding the board, the responsibility up to the board members. So that is also a huge problem. One for all, we had the recent scandal of the Kariba project, which is a project in Zimbabwe that has been going on for years, with primary actors in terms of registries and trading and developer companies. They've been selling certificates to primary listed companies, global companies, global brands. And they had all of a sudden to go to their financial analysts, financial stakeholders in general, and then they have to say, sorry guys, we couldn't meet those net zero strategy milestones because this piece is missing. So everything, it's an embarrassment across the whole spectrum of actions. ESG indexes of whatever sort, equity analysts would penalize your share price out of something that you did genuinely out of goodwill. So that is a huge problem that could even impair the whole carbon certificate industry. But there are solutions.
So leading on from that, you know, Simon, I mean, how does your insurance actually help solve these issues? Because it sounds like a significant problem, but what can you help firms with from a kind of an insurance perspective?
Sure. Well, critically, we are providing financial assurance instead of accreditation. Currently in the market, there's this plethora of organizations which are starting to rate the quality of the credit. But there again, if anything goes wrong, the buck starts with the buyer or the user of the certificate. So this brings about many benefits because what we actually do through the insurance is acquire replacement carbon credit certificates of a similar type and quality as the ones that had been purchased and retire those. So you don't walk away with just a financial compensation, you walk away with real and legitimate offsets, which allows you to maintain your sustainability statement. And that's an important factor, especially for European corporates, because, you know, if you have a turnover now in the EU or in excess of 3 million euros, you're legally obligated to issue an independently audited sustainability statement. And this gives rise to a lot of problems in respect of the current certificate and the use of them. The CFOs of the companies do not know how to revalue these certificates, particularly when they transfer them from one financial year into the next. But if they're backed by an insurance, it allows them to put them on balance sheet at the purchase price, at the cost of the certificate. And what does that do? It allows them then to give them the assurance to be able to stockpile some of the certificates, because as we head to 2030, and really the year in which it's going to start, and all the indicators are that it's going to be in 2027, that there is going to be this supply and demand issue, which is going to drive up the price for the carbon credit certificates.
Now, and I guess before I ask the next question about affordability, I guess an observation is what you're describing, I think, also avoids that classic problem of moral hazard here, because it's not about insuring it away, is it? It's about making sure that you still deliver on your carbon commitments.
Absolutely. But it's important to note that for us to be able to insure a carbon credit certificate, we undertake a huge amount of due diligence with the application of technology. So in terms of the affordability, it's cheap. We're down to low single digits. I mean, if you bought currently today, if you bought a very high quality carbon credit certificate for $20, it's going to cost you 60 cents to have it insured, as an example.
Mm. And what about this carbon actuator, which you kind of almost sort of alluded to there, which obviously is, using data and tech. What role does that play in your solution?
Well, this is our baby, and basically it's an MRV plus platform. So it's monitoring, reporting, and verification. The plus bit is in respect that we capture both contextual and scientific data. And we do this by using satellite feeds. We source from multiple satellites. And we build up the NDVI and EVIs. Now, these are the Normalized Differentiation Vegetation Index and Enhanced Vegetation Index. And we look at infrared satellite imagery and build up a map of the density of the forest itself so that we can assess the performance. And this allows us to understand whether the credits issued from that project for that particular year are correct. We look at the methodology of the registry body. We understand what's going on in the ground. We use historical satellite data. We need a minimum of 2 years data, and usually it's 5 data. And this allows us to legitimize the projects and really validate their performance. We also provide additional insurance, and that's down at project level. So the most cost-effective way in which members and users can acquire carbon credit certificates is to invest themselves into the projects. But there are a lot of risks associated with that. And we have specific bespoke products that remove many of these risks for investors directly into projects, such as using NASA data feeds for fire and NOAA data feeds for climatic risks. And we're able to set perimeters around the boundary of the forest, which generates alerts on the detection of fires, depending on the wind direction and the climatic conditions. In addition to that, we also have a neural network, which is a type of track and trace system, which allows us to keep an eye on all of the movements of the certificates associated with that project. And in particular, ensure that no duplication of certificates are being copied or traded elsewhere. And that's an important benefit to have. So overall, we improve the risk management, we bring transparency to what's going on, yeah, that's where the technology sits.
Indeed. And Manuela, I mean, it's fascinating the kind of detail that Simon's given there about what that platform does. How would you perhaps kind of summarize that from a kind of value proposition perspective if you were talking to RICS members, built professional and built environment professionals?
Well, the point is, if we go back to back to square one, they need to offset, and they need to do that in a reliable way, in a trustable way, under three profile. One is the fact that they purchase something which is right and is not invalidated even after post-retirement, because the Kariba project that we were saying has invalidated also the back years, the previous years. So that is one of the most important things, because you have to kind of say, that you are walking on sound ground, not that you're wibbly wobbly. Something can just go and impair what you've been doing. That's one. So you're doing that. The second thing is that because of that, you are able to make decisions that are based on data, on demonstrable data. That is something that, again, is not only for the reporting. Reporting is very important, but it's just the other side of the coin. Reporting is being able to describe what you've been doing. So what we are saying is we are giving you the tools to do the right thing and then to report it in the right way. So you have to buy the things that are right based on demonstrable due diligence and the fact that the Carbon Actuator gives access to the clients, to data and to the platform that is updated in near real time. So you get continuous monitoring. And if something goes wrong, you get an alert. So the alert that is triggered on bespoke triggers would help companies to take actions in an active risk management, not just sitting passively and then say, oh gosh, this has happened, what should I do? Oh, I have the insurance. No. You know in advance, and knowing in advance, you can also plan. So the fact that we add the insurance makes the intangible tangible. And this is very important because it has many aspects. One thing is that you can plan and focus forward with certainty. So you can also accordingly plan your cash flow accordingly, because you know, market is down, I buy a bit more, I use them next year, I carry forward. I don't have to worry about at which level I should revaluate or not revaluate, how do I account for them? They are there, easy, nice. The second thing is obviously that the huge responsibility action, the governance, the processes, the talking to the auditors is simple, demonstrable. The third element, however, is that you have an instrument that is now tangible. So it can be used as a collateral in financing because it's something that can be used. So it doesn't have to sit idly on your balance sheet. You can use it in a way. But also, if you look at the many uses that can be done, for instance, just to give you an example, the Singapore government is now allowing corporates to pay corporate tax rate with carbon credit certificates. So that's very important because it is a clear call to actions to corporates, and that would be of immense importance for the RICS members because they are global members. They are smaller members, but global members. And the built environment will increase enormously in the Asia Pacific, apart from the Western economies. So it is something that is high on everybody's agenda, and the call to action is for everybody. And obviously, the built environment having such a big contribution to the emissions is in the front line. We know that. So these are the things that should be really now be high on the priority, and I'm sure they are.
Yeah. No, and obviously, you know, in many respects, the whole sustainability piece is the right thing to do for the sector. But clearly, the sector also has financial drivers in terms of operating costs, but also interestingly, I suppose, around, you know, financing projects and the kind of initial capex. Is there a link here to cheaper, you know, cheaper credit in terms of lending as well?
Oh, definitely. There are the so-called green bonds that are or green financing, and they offer better financing terms, cheaper financing terms to the initiatives that are demonstrably helping the transition. And definitely the housing is something which is absolutely top priority. First of all, because everybody of us needs to live somewhere, so it's a real need. It's not a luxury. It's something that we need to have. And the second thing is that, as Simon was saying before, it won't stop. It will increase because population is increasing. And so that will be very much important. In fact, we are very well aware of initiatives in the banking industry to green the banking mortgage sector. We are participating to that, and it's fascinating because basically let me say accessories, like how do you heat the apartment? Would you have a solar panel? Would you have a heat pump? All these things are super initiative. They are costly. And in order to remove some obstacles for the adoption, insurance can play a big role, apart from the carbon actuator, but it's part of it. And once they are there, then the cost of financing comes down. So
Indeed.
green initiatives are definitely something. And obviously, because of the fact that some of the emissions are unabattable, the carbon, being able to offset by carbon will also help the cost of financing diminish.
So Simon, back to you. We've talked quite a lot about this carbon actuator platform. How do users, built environment professionals, access that? What's the model you've built?
Well, if you take out an insurance with us, because we have to use the technology anyway as part of the underwriting due diligence, we share this. We share the use of the technology, we share the data that we receive, and in particular, we share the alerts which can lead to intervention, as Manuela indicated earlier. There is also the additional option, if you're investing in a project, and certain projects don't necessarily need, or it would be very difficult to obtain insurance, then you can subscribe as well to the carbon actuator.
And Manuela, asking you perhaps a difficult question to look into the future, it's always something I like to talk to tech partners about. Where do you see the next steps over the next few years for the built environment and our profession in respect to the whole decarbonisation process? Because obviously it's so front of mind now at so many levels, coming down from the capital markets and regulators and all the issues that we've talked about. But getting your crystal ball out, where do you see the next couple of years unfolding?
Well, there are two interesting trends. There are three interesting trends. One is, let's say, developing new technologies, so in an alternative to the nature-based solution, but they are far away, not in the next 2 years. They are in the next decades, so not immediately available. For the immediately available, you still have the cheapest, nature-based. Different sources, could be forest, could be ocean, could be mangroves, could be different, but definitely nature-based. So the alternative is either to buy the carbon credit once they've been issued, or to invest directly into the asset that produces. So to buy a piece of forest or to buy a piece of land. This is something that is depending on the size of the company, how many cash constraints they might have. But it might be very interesting, for instance, for the ones who have who are in the fund industry. So they make a fund, they buy a forest, so because within your, let's say, entire world, you have also people who manages land. Land is of many different types. And it could be a forest, which is still land, and it could be something that gives a reward, but also could be used as a direct access to the production of the carbon credit. So for instance, one big company can say, okay, I invest in a piece of forest, the return is guaranteed in a way that is insured. I have my forward production of carbon credit that I can use for myself, or if I have enough, or if I want, I can offer as a service down to my little supply chain, because they may not be in a position to have the dimension, to have the knowledge, so I can offer that to them. I can therefore strengthen my relationship with them, and at the same time, I green my scope 3, because my supply chain will be greened, and I know that because I'm doing it. They are doing it through me. So I have a degree of certainty that goes beyond what they could declare, which is definitely good. But declarations are different standard, different format, different taxonomy, which is one of the biggest problem at the moment. So calling the same thing with the same name and same action may be a problem. So if you do that, on their behalf, it's better. Or might
Well,
be better.
this has been fascinating, and I'm sure, I presume if any of our listeners and members want to get in touch, I presume they can go to your website and have a look at what you're doing and literally probably get a demonstration in a bit more detail than we were able to do this morning. But it's been fascinating to chat, and certainly from an RICS perspective, this is a really strategic priority for us to understand how our impact on the built environment can be minimized. And there are lots of ways of looking at this problem. And as you said, Manuela, part of the problem is all these different ESG frameworks. It's very difficult, I think, for people to navigate this this whole challenge, isn't it? And to get assurance and to understand that what they're doing is really having an impact. But for today, thanks ever so much for your time, Simon, Manuela, and look forward to catching up again soon.
You're welcome, Andrew. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It has been very good. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Bye.